kind of spiritual power, divine power that's available to us if we tap into it, if we spend the time to find that light, that holiness that's in there. But we can only do that if we're focusing, if we're being intentional, if we're being aware, if we slow down enough. So I encourage breathing. Like if someone says something to you or you're about to just go off on somebody, the first thing you do, take a slow breath and just kind of slow down and figure out what's going on inside of you so that you can be in control of your behavior and not the other way around. If we don't spend time centering ourselves, using spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, then the things that are going on inside us will control us.
Welcome to the Cardinal Way for Men. My name is Ed Cardinal. And as you know, my mission is to help men recovering from alcoholism go from isolation, unhealthy and unsatisfied, to establishing community, fulfilling their purpose and achieving vital health. And my guest today is someone I had the opportunity to hear a few of his sermons. It's Pastor Stuart, and I'm so glad he could join us tonight, taking some time out of his busy schedule. And I find him to be very intellectual yet relatable. His sermons, I love the way he weaves stories into his message so that we all can understand what he's trying to get across as the theme or as the message. And I really appreciate that. And the words that come to me when I think of Pastor Stuart are compassionate, kind, relatable, approachable. And the icing on the cake is he's a runner like I am. So really, really enjoy my conversations with him, and he's doing great work here in Weaverville, North Carolina. And Pastor Stuart, welcome, and maybe we can start with maybe a little background story on yourself and how you headed in the direction that you did.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me here, Ed. I really do believe in what you're doing and the mission of this podcast, not just specifically, but in general, to provide good community and support for guys who are going through these specific struggles, because we all have struggles. We all go through stuff. Right. And it's a lot easier to get through them if you've got a buddy or some buddies to help you figure things out. So right. I'm very honored to be here and to talk about stuff, both just in terms of health, kind of holistically. And that's one of the reasons I run, because I see health as an inside and out kind of thing. So I was very glad that I could get to know you through both the running and through some mutual friends right. who we were both kind of ministering to at the same time. So what a blessing getting to know you has been, and now being a part of this conversation and this project. Yeah. I've been a pastor here in Weaverville, North Carolina for 6 years. And before that, I was a pastor outside of Raleigh, and I've been a youth minister at churches in Virginia and Tennessee. I've been an editor of Bible study curriculum. And I just felt, even back when I was a teenager, some kind of holy nudge, or if you want to call it a calling, you can, that my kind of profession, my vocation would be in serving people through the framework of the church. My parents always served their churches. My dad's a pastor. My maternal grandfather was a pastor. So I really know the church setup, and I was blessed with good, supportive, healthy, loving churches that helped shape me and encourage me. And sadly, I've heard examples from other people that they did not get that blessing of church life when they were growing up. So I really want to give that gift to others, that gift that I received growing up in churches, being encouraged and shaped in good and healthy ways. And so that's why just being a minister is an honor and a gift to me, because I get the privilege of walking alongside people in their life's struggles and celebrations. And like I said, for a while, I was putting together Bible study curriculum, and it was a really great challenge, and it was interesting, but I was disconnected from real people's real lives. And that's a real blessing of ministry, that I can be there with people and for people on the good days and the hard days. And also on Sunday mornings with the preaching, I put a lot of work into making the sermons that I give or the Bible study lessons really something that people can digest and be inspired by and challenged by. Because if they're just, I don't want it to be only warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
Like everything's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Follow Jesus and you won't ever have any problems, because that's not true. So I do want it to, yes, be inspiring, but also challenging. Like, we can grow, we can be better, we can keep learning, we can improve ourselves, we can serve others, we can put our gifts to work. So that's what I try to do in the sermons and the lessons, and hopefully they have come across, because everybody needs that, and it's an honor to do that. So
Yeah.
that's why I like being a minister.
Yeah. Don't you think that it's the challenges that we come across in our lives are the things that can bring us closer to a spiritual practice? So it's actually you might not see it that way in the beginning, but if you really maybe down the line take a look at it, it was a gift.
Yes. I don't use a phrase that a lot of people do use, is that everything happens for a reason. And I don't use that phrase. It's not in the Bible for sure. And I don't really believe it. But what I do believe is, like you said, everything that happens to us can be used for good, even if it's some bad thing, some struggle, some challenge, some bad news. It can be redeemed. Redemption is a big theme in Christian faith and spirituality, and I believe that even the tough things that happen to us, they can teach us something and make us stronger.
Yeah.
Kind of like when we go to the gym, the only way to get stronger muscles is through resistance. And so, even like they say, no pain, no gain. Nobody should like the pain. Runners are weird, and they say they like the pain because they're weird. But it is that kind of resistance that builds up strong muscles,
Right.
and you can't build up strong muscles without resistance.
Right. One of the reasons this is my mission is because I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I came into recovery at a young age. I was 26 years old, and so it's been 35 years this year. And I find that what I'm trying to help men with is to save them years of suffering that I had to go through to get to where I am now. So it's the pain that I went through. I want to sort of help men not have to go through that same pain. I mean, we all have to go through that struggle, but maybe we can lessen it a little bit through what we're offering, through the education, through our stories, through what we have to share, our experience, our wisdom through that process. And so that's why I do what I do.
Wonderful.
And part of that for me is not just a holistic sort of lifestyle that I've sort of incorporated and added as I've gone through my recovery, but there's also a spiritual aspect to recovery, and I think that's a strong component. And in my opinion, it should be. How do you see the role of faith in recovery?
I talk about faith with two columns that support one's faith. the two main aspects of faith for me as a Christian, as a minister. There is an inner component and an outer component of faith, and they both need to be strong. The inner component is the beliefs that we have, as a Christian, that comes from the sayings of Jesus, the stories in the Bible, what we believe about how God works and how we're made. So it's that inner component, that belief, and the outer component is the actions that we do or the spiritual practices that we do that help us or that help others. And so when it comes to addressing any problems or challenges in the world, the stronger that both those pillars are, the stronger we'll be in total to address them. So like you asked about spiritual practices. So those would be the outer component of faith, the actions that we do. And for addressing addiction, I would say, and this is going to sound almost like what we would call a Sunday school answer, because it's kind of the obvious answer, but prayer and meditation. And some people might get off by that because I think prayer has to be on your knees, on your bed with your hands, in the pose, or they think of meditation has to be in like the lotus position, with your hands or something. And it can be, that's totally fine, but it doesn't have to be limited to that. Really, when I talk about prayer meditation, I mean it as centering yourself, finding your center, kind of looking under the hood of what's going on inside you. And when you look down and find your center, you find inner strength that you might not have known was there. So you have to practice those spiritual practices intentionally, because life, job, family, the world, it's really distracting, it's really loud, and the only way we can kind of look under the hood, how our engine is running, find our center, is through those intentional times of prayer, meditation, of centering. And I believe, as a Christian minister, that in that center, the Holy Spirit of the Creator is there. It's within all of us, and there's true kind of spiritual power, divine power that's available to us if we tap into it, if we spend the time to find that light, that holiness that's in there. But we can only do that if we're focusing, if we're being intentional, if we're being aware, if we slow down enough. So I encourage breathing. Like if someone says something to you, or you're about to just go off on somebody, the first thing you do, take a slow breath and just kind of slow down and figure out what's going on inside of you, so that you can be in control of your behavior and not the other way around. If we don't spend time centering ourselves, using spiritual practices like prayer and meditation, then the things that are going on inside us will control us, because we're not aware of the forces that are pushing and pulling. So these days, one of the kind of words that's in fashion is mindfulness.
Right.
And as much as I don't like trendy words, it really is a helpful practice and a helpful concept to remember, because all it really means is being aware of what's going on around you and what's inside you. Because if you're not, then the forces that are at play outside and inside, they'll be controlling you instead of you controlling them. So that the spiritual practice of prayer and meditation and being mindful, whether it's like intentional breathing or centering, that goes a long way with building up that awareness. And then the inner component of faith, the belief, as a Christian, like the biggest word in our belief system is grace. We say that word all the time. We sing songs about it. We sing about amazing grace, that God's grace is greater than all of our sins and wrongdoings, that there's nothing we can do that God's grace and forgiveness can't cover, nothing that's been done to us that God's grace is greater than all of that. And in fact, it's so amazing that we often don't believe it or accept it as true and real because it doesn't make sense to us logically. We think that, if people do something bad, they should be punished. So if someone is punished, then they must have done something bad. And if you do something bad, then you should feel bad about it. We get hung up on this kind of guilt system, punishment system, and that shame cycle just keeps pounding us down, and it makes whatever challenge we're going through twice as bad or
Right.
doubly hard.
Right.
So when I'm talking to people, they'll talk about an issue and they'll say, I feel really bad, I feel really guilty about that, and I understand, but don't make a hard situation that much harder by you giving yourself a hard time, because God doesn't. God wants to give grace and wants to give forgiveness. So that's how I feel, and I hope that faith can really be a blessing to those who are struggling with addiction. The inner sense of grace over all the things, and then the actions, the spiritual practices that'll help us be aware and more stronger in our struggle.
Mm. I love what you just said, because it reminds me of some of the things that I've been working on in my own life. I've worked a lot on forgiveness, forgiving my father, forgiving those who have wronged me. But what's come to me lately is probably the most important person I need to forgive, and that's myself. Because through addiction, we did things that, and I know I did some things that I'm not too happy about, and I actually feel bad about. But what you just said is so important, that grace of not, if I continue to beat myself up, that's going to make it twice as hard, twice as worse than it is. So that's a great point, great message. Appreciate that. I needed to hear it.
Yeah. Well, we all need to hear it because it's hard. It is hard to forgive other people, and it's hard to forgive ourselves.
Right.
So sometimes I think, why should I stand up in front of a bunch of people every single week telling them things that we kind of already know? It's because it's hard, and life is hard, and it's hard to be a good human, and we just need that regular encouragement.
Right. And the other thing that I really liked what you said is, and I really am a supporter and educator about having some sort of a practice that you talk about. And that's how I start my day, a morning practice. I think it's important to do the practice that you talk about first thing in the morning. That way you start your day, excuse me, on the right foot, in the right frame of mind. So I start with breathing, 5 minutes of breathing techniques. I'll use various breathing techniques, and then I meditate. And basically meditation is just being focused, like you said, bringing that focus inward. And the breathing can help you do that, because if you're focusing on the breathing, you're not focusing on anything else. So I'll use various methods to help me focus. It could be listen to certain sounds. It could just be silence, or it could be a guided meditation. And when I get to that place, and you mentioned this, if you can get to that place of calmness, of inner peace, then you get answers to questions that you have. And you would probably say that's the Holy Spirit talking to you.
Yeah.
And it's not until you can get quiet that you can hear those messages and get those answers. And sometimes before I go into meditation, I will ask, which is a prayer. I will ask for the answers when I go into meditation. And it's amazing how it happens and how it comes.
Yeah, there's a lot more wisdom and peace that is available to us. You might say just for free. if we would take the time to settle down and notice it and tap into it.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be, like you said, you don't have to be sitting in a lotus position. You don't have to, have your hands together in prayer position. I can get to that place trail running, and you probably experience that in running too. I get a lot of answers to questions when I'm running, because you have to focus on what's in front of you, particularly when you're trail running. If you don't, you're going to be falling on your face. So that's more that focus, and then you're breathing because you're running, and around here, as you know, you're running up a lot of hills. So I've had a lot of insight during my runs, and I don't know if you've experienced that yourself.
Yeah, and it's remarkable that even though I've lived here in Western North Carolina for 6 years now, every time I go out for a run, I think, running uphill is hard. And over time, if I can do things to help me tackle those hills, I will tackle them better. They might always be hard to run up, but if I can do strength training, breathe right, have good form, cadence, then the hills are manageable.
Yeah.
Still hard, but
Yeah.
manageable.
But like you said, it's a great metaphor for life. We have those difficult times when it's going to be a struggle, but it's going to make us stronger if we keep practicing and keep challenging ourselves and don't give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you had experience with men recovering from alcoholism in your congregation and throughout your years as a pastor?
It's interesting how in churches I will often encounter people who are already in recovery, or who have been in it for a long time, or they've already started the 12 steps,
Yep.
which and they are just some of the best kind of church people who I love dearly. But I think sadly it says a lot that a lot of people with kind of obvious outer addiction struggles don't connect with the church in those early stages. I think that says a lot about the old ways of churches that have brought a lot of judgment or a lot of shame. So people will start the kind of recovery process outside the church, for better or for worse, and then I will meet them once they have reached a kind of a level of stability, and then once they do, they and I meet them as part of the church community. They're awesome people, and I think they have done a good job of again with the focus, kind of focusing their drive on things that are good and helpful, because it seems like when there is an addiction and the addictive practice is stopped or taken out, that leaves kind of a gap of both time and energy. And if you can find a good outlet for that, like if there is a good healthy church environment that serves people, that encourages people, then I love having people in my church who have gone through the struggles of addiction, because they're the most compassionate. They have the biggest volunteer heart, the biggest servant's heart. And I mean, like for my money, they're just the best people to have in church.
Yeah.
So that's oftentimes where I will meet them I say it unfortunately, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. You wish you would be able to help them sooner.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And you brought up Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, and
Mm-hmm.
they do talk about believing in a power greater than yourself. And call it what you want, call it God,
Hmm.
Jesus. Uh, but I find and I found when I was early in recovery and going to AA quite regularly, there was quite a few people who really were resistant about that piece of it. And I kind of wondered why. Do you have any thoughts about that?
It is true, sadly, that a lot of people have had harmful experiences in churches
Mhm.
in the past. I recognize that there are a lot of churches and ministers that are perhaps more harmful than helpful, and um, the church as a whole doesn't have a great history of showing the grace of God and the grace of Jesus, and too often they would use the human metric of punishment or guilt or shame.
Mhm.
So I think because of that history, that pattern, it has understandably turned people off from a faith community being a support in their recovery journey.
Mm. And
And
I'm
they might see it as not practical because the spirituality is a little abstract by its nature. It's more easy to understand. I'm addicted to this thing. I'm going to stop doing this thing, and more concrete kind of concepts. But the idea of spirituality, of centering, of mindfulness, that's kind of a harder, thing to grasp. So I can understand people thinking, well, what's the help that would come from that?
right, particularly
So,
early in recovery, there's so much going on in people's lives. But as you were talking and as I was thinking about my question, what came to me was what I said, turning your life over to a power greater than yourself. And I know for men, that can be a sign of weakness.
mhm.
We we've been raised as we can take care of ourselves. We need to be independent. We don't need to rely on anyone else. It's that lone wolf sort of scenario. So that might be a reason too, particularly with men. Uh, that's that vulnerability. It's asking for help. It's turning your life over to something other than yourself.
I think you're exactly right. I think that's true
Mm.
because we all of us, I can just speak, people like me, kind of guys, we want to take care of it. We want to take care of it by ourselves. It's hard to ask for help. We don't even want to ask for directions. We want to do it ourselves. We want to get there ourselves.
Right.
We don't like saying, "Hey, I can't get this done. I can't figure this out. I need a little help here."
Mm.
We don't like that vulnerability. We just don't like that feeling. We'd
Right.
rather just kind of, if we've got these instructions, we can follow these instructions. And so maybe some people might see the 12 steps as these are the instructions on how I go ABC and I solve my problem, everything's fine. And that's me controlling. That's me trying to follow the instruction manual on how to just take care of this whole addiction thing, um, by step.
Mhm.
But there really is an admittance, a confession that it's something bigger than me, and so I might need some help that's a little bigger than me. And
Right.
that's hard to say. It's hard to do. I think you're right.
Right. And then when you get in recovery, you're also being asked as a man to express emotions and feelings. It's
Mhm.
you're sort of being asked to do all the things that you were taught not to do, or that it was bad to do as a boy or as a young man growing up. And that can be difficult. I know it was for me. I always thought that there was because I was a sensitive boy and an emotional sensitive man that there was something wrong with me. I judged myself based on what I saw in the media and I saw my father. um, what I was taught. So I had to break free of those shackles of that cultural conditioning. And that was one of those hills I had to climb. And that's what I'm trying to help men with, that expressing emotions, being vulnerable is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength and courage.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I kind of have a different hill because I mentally affirm all the things you said, but it's just so hard for me to talk about what I'm feeling and to just get it out there, even though I know this is healthy, this will be helpful. It's just so darn uncomfortable and awkward and messy, and I just don't like it. And it's just hard.
Yeah, I mean you have other strengths that might not be, that might be your hill to climb. I think for me, being vulnerable is one of my strengths. And I feel that because of that, that's what I'm supposed to model for other men. Um, and yeah, so it's what I've learned to overcome and helping others, serving other men in that process. And they might not get to that point of being comfortable with vulnerability like I am. That's okay. That's not something you're comfortable with, expressing emotions and feelings, but um, some men might gravitate towards it. And that's, we can always, we can't reach everyone, as you know, but we can reach some people.
Yeah, and I'm thankful for this podcast and your project for trying to take away some of that stigma,
Yeah.
Whatever people's different stigmas might be,
Right.
trying to say you don't have to let that hold you back, and doing some reframing. I think reframing
Yeah.
is really important.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I believe, and it's something that I'm really finding here in Western North Carolina, being out of the Northeast. Not that there wasn't community there, but we're finding that we're building it much more quickly here than we have before in other places we've lived. And I think community is so important in support of the challenges that we might come across, so we can reach out to other people that will help us, and we can help other people in that community, which you do a huge job of here in Weaverville. You're such a pillar of that support and that building that community. I think you do a great job of that, and you have some great people in your congregation, and I know some of them, and I know they're very involved in supporting what you have going on. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. I think, and that's something I want to continue to do, is build community. And I think it's important for men in recovery. And I think that's one of the benefits of like AA and maybe joining a men's group. I have a virtual men's group that I facilitate on a weekly basis, and it's something I became a part of early on in my recovery, and it was such a benefit to my growth, because I was able to challenge a lot of those stigmas through that process.
That's good. It makes me think that there's a lot of good kind of metaphors or analogies that I think would resonate with a lot of guys, like going into battle or combat. You
Yes,
don't go alone. You go with your comrades,
right,
your brothers in arms, your band of brothers, your company, and you're there. You support each other, and you're fighting together. It's not just you trying to win the war by yourself. You
right,
have to do it together.
right,
And so, reframing the communal support aspect, and not as the stigma of weakness, but as, no, this is a source of true strength that will help you combat all the crap that is coming at you or it's been dumped on you. all these guys are here. We've got our backs.
Right, right. Yeah, the band of brothers. We're stronger as a whole than we are as an individual. And
Hmm.
in AA they call it a fellowship.
Hmm.
That's why it's a fellowship, and yeah, so important. So is there anything else that you think might be helpful? Any other words of wisdom besides the many that you've already given us that you could impart on men recovering from addiction or men recovering or struggling with anything?
Well, you can never stop a preacher from talking. A preacher can always find stuff to say, and we always think in parables,
Yeah,
like Jesus did,
yeah.
and Jesus did some of his best teaching in parables. So, listening to you talk, I kept thinking of more kind of analogies, more comparisons. Oh well, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that, and I kept thinking of you know a lot of guys to fix things, do repairs, figure out how things work. Maybe it's, your car, small engine repair, home repair projects. Me and my best friend were just talking about how he's taught carpentry and he's building this playhouse for his kids. And that's been a real focusing, energizing practice for him. So I wonder if a way to reframe this kind of group support, whether it's a group of other guys or a group of other people on your team who might be a minister or this kind of doctor or a therapist or a counselor, to reframe that as like it's a project, it's a home repair project, and to think of yourself as what you're working on. You're working on yourself. And uh, we bought a house when we moved here 6 years ago, and we had this big, terrible washer flood, like our clothes washer, like the pipe burst, it flooded and everything. And so we had to call this like a disaster relief company or something
Yes.
to
Oh
come
yeah.
over and
Oh yeah, yeah.
address the damage. And
Remediation.
the guy, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, the joys of home ownership.
Mm.
And anytime anybody says the joys of home ownership, it always means that it sucks, that it's a
Yeah.
it's a pain, because over the years there's wear and tear,
Yeah.
there's things break, you have to address it. And when our washer flooded, we had to call that remediation company. They had to get somebody to dry it out. They had to get somebody to get out the insulation. We had to get a ceiling guy to put in a new ceiling. All these people on their team that they were coming in to help us take care of all the different things. So we might, as we work on the project of ourselves, our kind of our home ownership, our body ownership, our soul ownership, we might need to call in some specialists, and that's okay. We might need a contractor who knows different specialists. So maybe, a minister's like a contractor. I try and keep a list of good counselors and therapists and people who know a lot more training in psychology than I do. So they might, oversee this thing or this part of you that needs a little attention. And when it comes to addiction, I see that as a really important thing that needs attention, that's part of our greater project of working on ourselves. And much like kind of the home damage analogy, addiction is one of those damages, one of those things. It's a symptom of something else, something's going wrong, or it might be a defense mechanism. We might use it as a numbing agent. But whatever the addiction that someone is wrestling with, usually it's a reaction to something else, because it's all kind of connected. So the big message that I try and get across when I talk to people who are struggling with that, they're usually focused on, like you said, I've done these bad things. I feel bad about it. I want to stop doing those bad things. But through that kind of mindfulness practice, the prayer meditation, realizing what else might be going on, realizing there's more stuff going on than that one kind of obvious problem. Like in your house, if you notice there's a wall with mold on it, you need to call a mold guy, and he's going to come over and clean it up. You have to do that. Have to call that specialist. But what if it comes back? What if it keeps coming back? Then, well, maybe there's something else going on. Maybe you want to look a little deeper inside. Or if you have electrical problems, or your ceiling is slumping, the shower pressure's too low, maybe the problem is there's like a pipe leak underneath. There's something kind of deeper, and you really have to sorry, excuse me. I've been talking a lot. So this the Holy Spirit told me to take a break. So you really have to do the work of looking under the hood, looking under the floorboards, seeing what's really going on, to help you manage the outer symptoms or ramifications, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I like to use the analogy of peeling an onion. So you're peeling layer by layer. So peeling an onion, it's, you're using a house as the metaphor, the analogy, but you're getting to the core of why it is that you're using substances or whatever it is that you use to cope with the core struggle. So sometimes you need a team, like you said, you need a team, a wellness team, a health team to help you to peel that onion. And so for me, it was more than just quitting alcohol. It was going to AA, having that support, getting involved with a therapist, joining a men's group. And then there was the health team, yoga teacher, acupuncturist, and massage therapist. It's a whole holistic approach. And then eating healthy and doing the mindfulness practice or the morning practice. So there's a lot of different components that can help you heal and explore and navigate some of the challenges.
Yeah. Hopefully that can take some of the stigma away.
Right.
If you treat it like an investigation or a repair project to figure out what's going on. I'm gonna get down into the gears of me and see what's been pushing and pulling, what's been squeaking, what's not working right. It's easy to get distracted by the outer like the addiction that presents itself. Whatever the addiction is, because that will cause a lot of problems and a lot of fallout. And so everybody else might talk about that and you might focus on that, but there's other stuff going on. If you can kind of nip it in the bud, like I don't want this problem to keep coming up. I want to address what's really going on.
You need to dig a little deeper. You need to dig and and not, like you said, it's not just about the outward manifestation, but what is it manifesting? What is the core struggle?
And that's why I liked one of the things you told me about this podcast and your project is helping people live the best versions of themselves.
Right.
So it's not about stopping this one behavior or fixing this one problem, but like a whole body tune-up.
Right.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to was watching this or listening to this podcast and really liked what your message and liked what you had to say and wanted to talk more with you and reach out to you, how could they do that, Pastor Stuart?
They could send me an email if they wanted to. It is Stuart, Stuart, at fbcwvl.org. That stands for First Baptist Church, Weaverville, fbcwvl.org.
Okay. And I will also post that in the description of this podcast, so people will have access to that.
Yeah, and you don't have to come to my church.
Right,
You don't have to, put money in the offering plate. You don't
right,
have to live here.
right,
Um, we all need help,
right,
and that's one thing I think is special about being a minister as opposed to maybe a therapist where you have an appointment time,
right,
an hour on Mondays.
right,
But a minister is about walking alongside, sharing the journey, and it's a blessing to me to share journeys with people because we all have struggles and hardships,
right, right.
and we're here to help each other walk the mile, bear
Right.
the loads.
That
So
absolutely.
happy to do it.
Well, I appreciate your again taking your time out of your busy schedule. It was terrific, terrific points you made, great messages, and I always love how you use metaphors and symbolism and stories, and it makes it more relatable, and you remember those things. You remember what you just talked about, like tinkering in the engine and the house, and it's a great way to look at it. And yeah, because men do like to take action. We're action
Hmm.
oriented,
Hmm.
and we like to accomplish things, and so it's a great way to kind of reframe it, like you said. So
Good.
thank you.
You're
Appreciate
very
it.
welcome.
Okay.
You're very welcome.
Right.
What a great project. What an honor to be part of it. Hope it can help.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. If you like that video, please check out my other video about the importance of having an attitude of gratitude.